A little company would be nice. Would you mind? We set off side by side along the path, our dogs running around happily. If only we could be so carefree, Kate said wistfully. After all, they just met, but have already become best friends. We can be friends, I said hopefully. What it was, I still can't explain, but I liked Kate right away. She seemed sincere enough, and from what I saw, she was very nice. I'm not sure my husband would like... She stopped herself, then turned her head to smile at me. But it would be nice to have company, someone to talk to while we walk. That's what we did. As long as the path was wide enough, we walked side by side and chatted about the virtues of our pets, the weather, and the scenery. The country park consisted of paths, lakes, green spaces, and woodland. Some paths were wide and open, wide enough for 2 or 3 people to walk side by side. Others passed through bushes and trees and were, of necessity, quite narrow. As the path narrowed, I slowed down to let Kate lead the way. It was a gentlemanly thing to do, but I have to admit that when she walked in front, I had a great view of her jean-covered butt, and I'm sure her hips swayed a little more when she walked in front. I explained that I mostly work from home, so I need to go out for an hour-long lunch break, and on the days when I went to the office in the city, I walked with King in the evenings. Having completed our route, instead of turning onto the path where we met, which ran next to my house, I stayed next to it to exit the park through the main entrance. This meant a bit of a detour for me, but it was worth it. This is mine. I pointed to the tree-lined road that ran parallel to the edge of the park. Maybe we'll see each other again. I would like that. I noticed that she was smiling when our eyes met. Well, then, goodbye. It was nice to meet you. Goodbye, Kate. As I walked home, I realized that for the first time in a long time, I truly felt happy. Jake seemed very nice. We talked casually. He made me smile. And then, as we walked, I realized that I was laughing with him. I still loved my husband, that's for sure. We were married a long time. He made me laugh, and now I miss that. After thinking about it, I started walking Tasha to improve my fitness, lost a little weight, and now felt very good again. I began to overhaul my wardrobe, buying more stylish clothes, sexier underwear, all to boost my self-confidence. Of course, my children, Sarah and Tom, noticed the recent changes in me. They even complimented me. I knew that my husband always found me attractive and sexy. He's told me this enough times. We had a good sex life. He always made me feel wanted, and I loved giving him pleasure. He worked hard to keep our family together, and I loved him for that, so I felt it was my duty to reward him. I didn't tell anyone at home about Jake, but now that I think about it, there was no reason not to. It shouldn't have been a secret. After all, we were just hanging out together. But, one way or another, I didn't say anything about my meeting and time spent with a handsome man. The next day, I didn't see Jake. For some reason, it seemed like it meant more to me than it should. I still looked around for him but didn't see anything. In fact, I didn't see him again that week. Since it was a family weekend, I didn't go out on my own until the following Monday. I felt a surge of pleasure when I heard my name called shortly after I entered the park. "Hey, Kate," I called, and she stopped to wait for me to catch up. "I'm glad to see you." "Hey, Jake." Her smile was a mile wide. "It's nice to see you, too. How are you doing?" So we started and repeated our previous meeting. We walked and talked, and the dogs played together, just like last time. Our conversation was light, casual, and innocent, so why did it bother me so much? After that second meeting, we began to meet regularly. We didn't agree on anything, but we both settled into a compatible routine. Sometimes I arrived first, sometimes I quickened my pace to catch up with Kate. I had a shortcut to the house, so when I ran into her, I came out the other side. But with Kate, I never came back the same way, preferring to take the long road to spend more time with her. Sometimes I would meet her at the end of my driveway. After a few weeks, it became more regular. I would wait for her there, and she would just walk next to me, while we walked the dogs on leashes. Nevertheless, we walked and talked, enjoying each other's company, and seemed to have become bosom friends. Our conversations weren't intimate. We just enjoyed being together. I liked Kate, and she seemed to enjoy spending time with me, and we didn't do anything wrong. Quite a bit of time passed, and we began to take a break from walking on one of the many benches, always sitting, with a decent distance between us. Except for that first meeting, we haven't touched each other. I was looking forward to meeting him, perhaps a little more than I should have. I began to think more about what I was wearing. I cared more about my appearance than a simple walk with the dog deserved. Soon after our first meeting, he began complimenting me on my outfit or hairstyle, especially if I did it differently than the previous day. Of course, when it rained, I wrapped myself in a raincoat, but there was always something smart underneath it, in case the weather improved, and I could unbutton the raincoat. It was important to me that he thought about me, maybe even more than it should have been. It was clear that I wanted him to like me, and it seemed like that was the case. He was always happy to see me, and if for some reason we missed each other, he would tell me the next day how disappointed he was not to see me. Things started to change. I'm not sure exactly when, but probably when he asked if I minded if he ate his lunch while we walked. I, of course, agreed, and he took a sandwich out of his pocket. We talked while he ate. As a result, our walk became longer. We spent more time together. After that day, I began to do the same, so that, weather permitting, we sat and ate together every time we met. Summer came, and I started wearing dresses and sandals rather than the jeans and sneakers I had been wearing until now. The park became busier, and one day we found all the benches occupied and couldn't sit down to eat. The next time I saw Jake, he had a car blanket under his arm. I looked at what he was saying in bewilderment. "This is so we can sit somewhere if the benches are occupied." It was, so we found a patch of grass overlooking a quaint little pond in a wooded part of the park and spread out a blanket and sat down to eat our respective lunches. It was a wonderful day, sunny and warm. Birds were chirping happily. Butterflies fluttered and fluttered around us. When Jake had eaten, he lay down with his hands behind his head and his eyes closed. I couldn't resist, and looked. When he settled down, he shifted so that the bulge in his pants was in my peripheral vision. Its shape was quite obvious. It was impressive. I know I shouldn't have looked, but I did. I felt my body flush, and confident that my flushed cheeks would give away my inappropriate thoughts. I stuttered. "I finished my lunch? Maybe it's time for us to go?" "Why rush? We have plenty of time. Let's lie down and enjoy the sun. It's so nice here." So, against my better judgment, I did just that. I made sure my dress was in place, covering everything I needed, and lay down next to him. I didn't put my hands behind my head. I was sure that the dress was too short for that. Kate looked good in jeans and a t-shirt, but now she wore summer dresses on warm, sunny days. They were quite modest, but even so, they showed off her figure to perfection. The slight rise of her heeled sandals made her legs look even more beautiful, and she now had a more pronounced hip span when she walked. I really enjoyed communicating with this wonderful woman. Instead of just relaxing on a bench, we started taking a packed lunch with us. If the weather allowed, it increased the time I could spend with her. We always found something to talk about. I really liked Kate. I really liked her. One day, the benches were full. School was out, and a lot of people were going out, and we couldn't find a free bench, so the next day, I took a car blanket with me. The patch of grass we found overlooked a pond in the wooded part of the park, and after spreading a blanket, we sat down to lunch. It was a beautiful, warm day. I finished my sandwich before Kate, so I lay down with my hands behind my head and my eyes closed. I had been lying there for no more than a couple of minutes when Kate suggested we go home. This was unusual. Kate usually stayed late, so I asked why there was a rush. And as I spoke, I raised my head to look at her. Her neck and cheeks looked a little flushed, as if she was blushing. I asked if she was okay, mentioning that she seemed a little, well, worried. She replied that everything was fine, adding that I was right, there was no hurry, the sun was probably hot on her, she muttered. At the same time, she stubbornly looked at the pond, but did not look in my direction, which was strange. Not knowing what else to do, I simply lay down again, saying what a wonderful place we had found, and inviting her to lie down too. She took no notice of my remark, but after making sure that her dress covered her legs properly, she lay down to enjoy the sun on her face. After a few moments, I turned my head to look at Kate. I loved looking at her. When I did, I was pleasantly surprised to find her beautiful blue eyes looking back at me. She immediately turned away, but not before I noticed the expression on her face. It was worried, as if something about me was bothering her. I turned my gaze to the sky, and we lay in silence for another 15 or so minutes before she spoke. "That's great, but I think it's time for us to go back." She was right. I needed to get back to work. I got to my feet faster than she did, and automatically offered my hands to help her up. Time seemed to stand still for a moment as she examined my hands. Then her gaze moved to my face, and seeing nothing that bothered her, she placed her hands in mine. I barely felt her weight as she rose gracefully to her feet and let go of my hands to smooth out her dress. "Thank you, good sir." Her tone was playful. Then she looked into my eyes. Helping her up, we stood very close, face to face, our eyes locked together for what seemed like an eternity, but was barely a second. Kate ended the call, pointing to the blanket on the ground. "We really should go." I tucked the folded blanket under my arm, and we each returned to our own houses. All the while my thoughts were occupied with what had just happened. Did I understand too much from her look? Did I misinterpret her expression? What did silence mean at that moment of intimacy? Did she expect some kind of reaction from me? There was no way we could go be on a friendly walk. She mentioned her husband, so there was no future between us. Why was I even thinking about this? I lived a fairly solitary life, work taking up all my time, until I met Kate. That is, until I met Kate, and now she was often on my mind. On the other hand, Kate had a family at home and, undoubtedly, for such an attractive person, many friends around. I was nothing special to her, just someone to spend an hour with, someone who was in the right place at the right time. Perhaps I should be sensible and cool down a little. Maybe change my exercise times and not try to see her every day? I will go later tomorrow. Yes, that's it. It will work. I almost kissed him. And what was I thinking? Well, I guess I didn't, did I? I thought. Lost at that moment. The warm sun, the picturesque setting, our relaxed communication, all this inspired me with strange romantic feelings. My thoughts went back to my courting days, to the rare moments when my boyfriend and I would escape our parents' attention for a few illicit minutes to caress and kiss each other. Who was I kidding? It was the idea of what his naked body might be like that caused the uneasy feeling I felt and made me blush like a schoolgirl. Then, when he caught my eye, my mind wandered because I was having these naughty thoughts, imagining what he would be like as a lover. As soon as I took his hands, we crossed the line, an important gesture that we had studiously avoided all these weeks. It felt nice, not wrong, hardly intimate, just hand on hand. Why then did my heart race, and why did I want him to kiss me so much? It had to stop. I was very close to kissing him, wrapping my arms around his neck and pressing my lips to his, wanting to tell him that everything was okay, that there was nothing wrong with a simple, friendly kiss on the lips. Only it wouldn't be like that. For me, it would be much more than that. I won't see him tomorrow. I'll go earlier or later. Maybe I'll miss him altogether. It doesn't matter. But I'll reject further temptation. Yes, that's exactly what I'll do. Good afternoon, Kate. It was almost an hour later than we usually meet. I deliberately ate my lunch at home while I was working, leaving King to walk later than usual, as I promised myself. I didn't want Kate to feel awkward, so I planned to skip her today. I even decided to go back to using the shortcut, but here she is, back at the place where we first met. As an apology, I added, "You're late today, aren't you?" Kate took this as an accusation. Why, yes. I had things to do, I wasn't going to go, but Tasha insisted in, and then, to make it sound like an afterward, she said questioningly, "Are you late too?" She must have seen something in my expression and continued, "Oh, I see you were trying to avoid me." No, but, well, maybe. I couldn't lie, it would be dishonest. I thought I embarrassed you yesterday, went too far, Made you feel awkward? She stopped walking, and I turned to face her. She looked slightly confused, as if she was lost, quickly scanning her surroundings to see if anyone was nearby. We're stupid, right? Her smile returned. We're just friends, and we didn't do anything that we shouldn't have done, but today we tried to avoid each other. You didn't embarrass me. I almost kissed you. At the same time, she covered her face with her hands. Her neck became almost crimson. Why did I say this? Forgive me. I'll go through it differently. Before she could finish, I took 4 steps towards her and grabbed her by the shoulders to pull her close to me. We are not stupid. You are not stupid. We have feelings for each other, although emotions that need to be kept under control. Her hands dropped from her face and rested on my hips as I finished. We can do this. Stay friends, enjoy each other's company, maybe even hug from time to time. I promise that I will not pressure or tempt you with anything else. I'm not worried about you. I need to trust myself. She looked into my eyes for a second, then, oh, what the hell, come on, we're already here. What harm can it do? With that, Kate placed her hand in one of mine, stepped away from me, and pulled me along with her, starting down the path. I needed no further encouragement and followed her lead as we resumed our easy conversation. The need to entertain and control our dogs meant that we didn't hold hands for long, but I was so impressed that the feeling of her soft skin against mine lasted for a long time. From that moment on, we became closer and closer. When we met, we hugged, and one day she kissed me on the cheek. She didn't think anything of it. She just pressed her lips to my cheek for a moment. The next day it happened again, a little longer the second time. After that, it was just accepted. It was our usual greeting. We also resumed having picnic lunches together, even sharing food on occasion. Since it was the height of summer, there was no need to bring a blanket, but we always sat on the ground when it was dry, and on sunny days we lay talking or just enjoyed the pleasant silence. It didn't matter, we loved being together. Of course, there were days when we weren't able to meet because I was at work or she had an unavoidable errand. I don't know about Kate, but on days like these, I felt an emptiness that I had never felt before. My master plan only lasted an hour. Tasha is a familiar creature, so as soon as I made my midday sandwich, she headed towards the door, tail wagging. She didn't take my word that we should skip it. She didn't understand that I was avoiding Jake. I managed to eat what I had prepared, but it was clear to me that a walk was inevitable. Confident that I wouldn't see Jake if I stayed an hour, I decided to take a solitary walk again. King suddenly appeared and took Tasha away for their usual chase. Jake had the same thought as me, so he stood there with a guilty expression on his face. After a formal greeting, he said, "I'm late today," thinking it was a statement of fact, but in my state of mind, given that he surprised me, I took it as a question and threw it back. He apologized, began to explain his feelings, and when he apologized, I think I accused him of trying to avoid me. He looked so sad that I tried to explain. Then I became embarrassed and hid my blush behind my palms. The next moment, I was already in his arms. I think I made a great statement that we are just friends and should enjoy each other's company without fear of complicating the relationship. I took his hand and walked down the path. I tried my best to suppress the pleasure I felt holding my small hand in his manly grip. It felt so right, too right, as if it belonged to him. When I finally needed to give little Tasha some attention, he let me go. What then shocked me was the feeling of emptiness that remained with me until the end of that walk. Now things moved on, and over the next few days, we greeted each other with quick hugs. I don't know exactly when, but I realized that I was now kissing his cheek as our arms wrapped around each other. Both actions lasted longer before we moved away from each other. And then one day, I had to go and put pressure on him. He was innocent, at least almost. After the obligatory kiss on the cheek, I tilted my head back to say something to him. Now I don't remember what, but I looked at his lips. He smiled. They looked simply amazing. So much so that I couldn't resist kissing them. It was just a peck, but I did it. I just crossed another line. What just happened? Her soft feminine lips met mine. Not for long, but I stood there stunned as Kate turned and headed down the path. King and Tasha happily trotting behind her. It took me a second to compose myself before I moved towards her. Am I thinking about this too much? Is she serious, or is she just playing a prank on me? My mind was filled with questions and, I admit, emotions. Should I reciprocate? Can I take a chance? I didn't want to offend her. Of course I shouldn't go any further. She was married and, after all, a mother. Yes, she, but not me. But it was she who crossed the line. It was she who raised the temperature. It was she who caused the excitement that I was now experiencing. When I caught up with her, she wordlessly took my hand. I turned my head to look at her questioningly, but saw what seemed to me to be a very pleased smile. While I was trying to figure out what it all meant, she did a double take. What? Did I do something to upset you? Her expression was what I can only describe as teasing, sassy, or provocative, perhaps a mixture of all three. She laughed and quickened her pace. Let's go find a place for a picnic. We settled down in a quiet spot, basically the same spot we originally used that time we almost kissed. Now we've kissed, how will that affect us? How will this kiss affect our friendship? Will it affect it at all? Now we sat on the grass and without a word took out food. We both pretended not to notice each other, focusing on the waterfowl that were diving for their dinner. This time, Kate finished her sandwich first and immediately lay down on her back to soak up the sun. But unlike the first time, she rested her head in her hands. I had to look. It would be hard to miss her long, slender, naked legs. Pulling her arms up to create a headrest, the hem of her summer dress revealed more of her thighs than I'd seen before, and I definitely wasn't disappointed. When I turned to look at her face, I thought I saw a slight smile. But her eyes were closed, so she didn't know I was looking. Or did she know? Soon, it was time for us to head home, even though my thoughts were filled with the thrill of her kiss, and then the sight of her beautiful legs. Our conversation was no different from the previous days. We ended our walk the same way as always. As usual, maybe see you tomorrow, as we have done many times before. She gave me no sign that anything had changed between us. I was confused. Why did she kiss my lips? Why did this excite me so much but seem to have no effect on her? What did it all mean? Maybe I'm reading too much into this friendly gesture? My mind was in turmoil. As I entered my home, I realized that I needed to get back to work, put my questions aside, and see what tomorrow would bring. I managed to do this for most of the afternoon and evening, but once in my bed, I was already beginning to fall asleep when my body seemed to remember the softness of her lips on mine. The feeling was so real that I had to check to see if she was lying next to me. My imagination began to run wild. When I set off the next day, I was full of anticipation, even excitement. How would she greet me? Would we kiss again? I tried to push this thought to the back of my mind. It was wrong. Unlike me, she is not free. We're friends, that's all. That's how it should be. Who was I kidding? I wanted her. My desire for her was stronger than I had ever felt for a woman. Trying my best to push these thoughts away and stay calm, keep an open mind, and not expect too much. My heart began to pound when I saw her waiting for me at the end of the road. Her smile was as bright as the sun, her eyes sparkling as I got close enough to see her. I prepared for a hug, hoped for a kiss, but I was disappointed on both counts. As I approached, she greeted me joyfully. Hey, Jake, what a wonderful day. At the same time, she turned towards the park, leaving room for me to walk next to her. No hugs, no kisses. Yes, it's always a wonderful day when I see you. My legs felt like lead as I tried to keep up with her, frustration weighing heavily on me as we turned towards our destination. I kept my hand close, hoping that she would take it in hers, but she maintained the necessary distance between us. All the way to the park, I promised myself that I would be more assertive. I would flirt a little. I wanted her now. Yesterday's kiss confirmed it. Today you look especially good. My glance at her was rewarded with a wide smile on those luscious lips, but still no touch of our hands. I was determined that I would try it today. I had to. Deciding that I should take the initiative, I led her to the most secluded part of our walk, The path was wide enough for us to walk side by side. I took a chance and took her hand. Relief washed over me when I felt her squeeze my hand reassuringly. Deciding to keep the initiative, I slowed down and pulled her hand back, causing her to turn towards me. Keeping my pace, I stepped towards her, pulled her into my arms and pressed my body against hers. Her eyes were wide open, and when I looked down at her, her lips parted slightly in surprise. She looked so delicious, so alive, so desirable. Holding her close, I would never have agreed to just kiss her this time. My heart was beating wildly. I kissed her. I didn't just kiss, I wanted it to last a long time. Doubts were swirling in my head. I was afraid that I had understood everything wrong. She would push me away or maybe slap me. Have I ruined everything? What was I thinking? Whatever it was, I ended up being the most surprised of all. After our short kiss the day before, Jake didn't try to do anything else to me. I laid down as soon as I ate, raising my arms to support my head, knowing full well that most of my legs would be exposed. I saw him looking and closed my eyes while he checked. Perhaps he would lean over and kiss me. I expected this, but I was determined not to initiate further action. I gave him a hint. Now everything depended on him. Perhaps I went too far. Is it wrong of me to think about such things? Yesterday nothing happened, Ed. I felt that he wants more, but he does not have the courage or perhaps the desire to go further. What if I misunderstood the situation? He didn't like me. I gave the situation more meaning than it really did. How presumptuous of me to think that he wanted to seduce me. Maybe he just wanted to flirt with me, tease me, and then maybe embarrass me. He walked along his path. When I reached the corner, I waited, deciding that today I would leave everything to his discretion. As he approached, I greeted him verbally, then immediately turned and headed into the park. He settled next to me. The atmosphere between us was heavy. I felt his hesitation, but also his anticipation. Why didn't he say anything? As soon as we entered the park, he began to control the situation, but not physically. He did not try to take my hand, but led me to one of the most secluded paths. My heartbeat quickened, anticipating his intentions. Then I felt it. He took my hand. Finally. I squeezed it reassuringly. Suddenly, he tugged at my arm. It made me half turn towards him. It all happened so fast. His body pressed against mine. His eyes stayed on mine for a brief moment. Then his gaze dropped as if he was embarrassed, but I was far away. His lips pressed against mine in a strong, insistent kiss. This is not the kiss we shared yesterday. His eyes locked on mine as if asking if it was okay to do this, or perhaps to prevent me from reacting negatively. Thoughts and feelings rushed through my head like a whirlwind. Desire, doubt, joy, shock, pleasure, the full spectrum. It felt like time stood still for a moment. I couldn't hear the birds singing, the leaves stopped rustling. I had no idea where Tasha and King were. All I knew was that I wanted him to kiss me again. Now. I saw a flash of hesitation in his expression, so I had to act. Despite my promise to myself, I wrapped my arms around his neck to pull him closer to me. His strong arms wrapped around me, pressing his body against mine. Time seemed immaterial as we hugged. He asked a question, and he had my answer. I wanted the kiss. I enjoyed it. He knew it now. Suddenly, a photo of my husband popped into my head. It shocked me, and I instantly pulled away from Jake. He looked disappointed. I think he read my expression. Disappointment gave way to concern. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have... He began to apologize. Putting my finger to his lips, I interrupted him. No need. It was nice. It's me. You should... I stopped when I saw that he understood, smiled, and extended my hand. Let's go eat, and we need to catch the dogs. We sat closer to each other, devouring our food, our shoulders touching the entire time. His hand came down between us and rested next to my thigh instead of on his, although I wasn't going to object if he dared. We lay there enjoying the sun, cuddled up to each other. But it was all physical. Our conversation on the way back became more teasing, perhaps flirtatious. I felt like I needed to calm him down and kissed him on the cheek before we went our separate ways. What surprised me was that I again felt no guilt as I completed my journey home. I felt his passion. I liked it. I wanted to feel it again, but I had to be careful. I was playing with fire. I promised myself that I was in control of the situation and it wouldn't go too far. I didn't allow myself to do this. After all, I was an adult, not a hormonal schoolgirl. Wow, that kiss. She was a good kisser. Her lips were so soft. She seemed to disappear into me. I felt passion as she pressed herself against me. Then everything stopped. I felt her tense up and pull away from me. I can only assume she remembered her husband. Her face showed something like shock that what we were doing was very wrong and forbidden. But when I tried to apologize, she stopped me and said that she liked it, tried to explain. But I knew. She had to see that I understood that she was not free to do what we did, that I pushed her to take too long a step. We were friends, that's all. But I was confused. She responded to my kiss. I felt her acceptance of me, her need for intimacy, reciprocal passion for me. Then, as we continued our walk, she was giving off positive vibes. She wasn't upset with me, quite the opposite. She seemed to encourage me, sitting closer, so close that we were touching. The back of my hand rested on her thigh. I felt the warmth of her soft skin against mine. Dizzying thoughts rushed through my head. Would I dare? Should I? The temptation was too great. It took all my control not to roll over and kiss her again. All too soon it was time to go home, and when we parted, she reached out to me and kissed me on the cheek. And it was something new. Was she encouraging me? Was this a message I should have heeded? What was this message? My male mind was working at full capacity. I wanted her. I knew that for sure. Taking her into my arms, I was convinced that I liked her body pressed against mine. We suited each other so well. She excited me like no other woman had ever done before, and I had to have more of her, if only she were available to me. Despite my doubts, I was determined to make love to her. To get her into my bed, I just had to try. Consequences be damned. Returning to work again, I was able to put the excitement and unclean thoughts aside until the evening. But then, I just couldn't get Kate out of my head. If I closed my eyes, I could feel her lips on mine. But this time, instead of her summer dress, I imagined her naked body pressed against mine. It was so real. It was supposed to happen. I just hoped that she felt the same way, that she would give in to me despite her other life, that she would give in to the passion that I now knew we shared. Imagine my disappointment when the next day, while I was waiting for her, she was walking with another woman. They were walking close, too close to be strangers. And it was obvious to me that there was intimacy between them. Only their dog Tasha was with them, so it was obvious that this other woman was not walking the dog and whom Kate had met along the way. As they got closer, I could clearly see the family resemblance. The new woman was a younger version of Kate. As they got closer, I saw Kate say something to the other. They both smiled at me, and those two smiles cemented my opinion that they were related. "Hi, Jake. Glad you're here today. I'd like to introduce you to Sarah, my daughter. Sarah, this is my friend Jake." "Nice to meet you, Jake." The young woman extended her hand to me, and I shook it. "I'm very pleased, I assure you." I managed to say this while my eyes darted between the two women. I wasn't sure how to handle this situation. My lust-filled intentions suddenly found themselves soaked in cold water. I intended to take Kate into my arms and enjoy another kiss today, if not during our first meeting, then certainly after we got to the park. Those hopes were dashed, that's for sure. I walked alongside them, and it reminded me of our first few walks, when we were just getting to know each other and we were both careful with what we said. Sarah was pretty, young, about 19 or so. She had her mother's looks, but her conversation lacked the breadth of knowledge that Kate had, but it was still a pleasure to be in their company. We had a picnic as usual, but without the intimacy that Kate and I had recently enjoyed, and there was certainly no hello or goodbye kiss when we parted. Sarah did turn and smile in my direction as they left, then laid her head next to her mother's, as if exchanging comments or secrets. "I'll go with you if you want," said my daughter Sarah, putting on her sneakers. "Since I'm at home, I can go. It will be a little company for you." What could I say? I couldn't refuse her. I love my girl. We definitely had to meet Jake. He, as usual, will be waiting. I had a feeling that after yesterday, he would really want to see me. Oh well, I'll just have to tell her about him on the way. She'll understand if I'm careful. I'm sure everything will be fine. She'll be reasonable. I was sure of it. That would be great. Let's go, I said on the way, deciding that I had to confess. Sarah, it's wonderful that you are with me, but there is something I haven't told you about. She reached her hand through mine to pull me towards her. This sounds ominous. I hope nothing bad? No, there's nothing wrong, I reassured her. It's just, well, I often meet with a friend, another dog breeder, you know. We just walk together and talk. We eat our lunch and chat about all sorts of things. Oh, that's cute. What kind of dog does she have? Well, that's the point. It must have been said in such a way that she turned to look at me before I could continue. And she is a he, I muttered. His name is Jake. What? You and a man? He's a friend, that's all. I tried to muffle her excitement. He lives alone and he has a dog named King. We often meet and go for walks together, nothing more. He's just a good person and good company. Nothing happens that I have to explain or be ashamed of. My mother is meeting a man for an illicit dinner date. I can't believe it, wow. What will happen? Don't even start, please. There's no need for anyone else to know. I looked into her eyes. Keep it to yourself, please. There's nothing between us, I promise. I beg you, leave this between us, you must. Is he? She nudged me with her elbow. There he is, waiting on the corner. Yes, this is Jake. Please don't embarrass me. I'll introduce you. Hi, Jake. Glad you're here today. I'd like you to meet Sarah, my daughter. Sarah, this is my friend Jake. Sarah was on her best behavior, for which I was grateful. I kept an appropriate distance from Jake and had to abandon our usual greeting as it might send the wrong signal, and I was still concerned that Sarah would keep my meeting with the walking companion a secret. It was only when we parted at the end of the walk that I felt her turn to look at him one last time and then whisper, I understand why you need me to keep quiet, for his age. He's quite cute. Are you sure there is nothing between you? Just Dad? I know what you're going to say. Leave it, please. I softened my voice. Please, I promise nothing is happening. Jake is my friend, that's all. I didn't do anything that I would be ashamed of. Certainly not like that. Good, good. I won't say anything. A sly smile appeared on her face. And I wasn't sure that she believed me. She was my daughter, and we never had secrets from each other. We always stuck together when we were against the male half of the family. I needed her to be on my side in this matter. After a pause, she added, For now, anyway, that would be enough. Any further protest on my part would give her reason to doubt my words, so I fell silent. Luckily, she did too, and there was no word on Jake when we got home. My secret was safe for now. This put an end to my plan. We weren't alone, so Katie didn't have a chance to explain anything. She just introduced me, without offering any details. Sarah didn't seem bothered by us walking the dogs together. I just hope I hid my desire for her mother well. I wouldn't want her to know what I think about her mom. The look back and the smile on Sarah's lips made me think a little. Did she catch something? Did Kate inform her about our meetings because she was not at all surprised when she was introduced to me? Let me just say this. It's not every day that a man like me gets to walk with two extremely attractive women. I can hardly believe my luck. The next day, Kate almost ran up to me, with only Tasha with her, and almost jumped into my arms. Well, hugs aren't quite the right word. I wrapped my arms around her to keep from falling over. She threw her head back, gave me a quick kiss on the lips, then took my hand and walked into the park. She likes you. When I turned to look at her, she smiled and continued. Sarah, my daughter, she thinks you're cute. I think she's cute too. She's a lot like you, I think. From what she said, I think she suspects something is going on between us, but of course I informed her. Seeing the expression of concern on my face, she added, she won't tell anyone, she promised. But, before I could say anything else, she added, well, in any case, there's nothing to tell, is there? We are just friends who often go for walks with our dogs." I muttered, "Walking the dogs? Did you know that the dog—" "Yes, of course. I know what dog breeding is. I was just joking. I pulled your leg a little." Now she was laughing. I liked her laugh. "Let's hurry up and find a place to sit and eat." So we did. Finding our favorite place unoccupied, we sat down on the grass and, as usual, talked about the news and other general matters while we ate. It was only as we were leaving that I brought up the topic that had occupied me most and had haunted me since the last time we were alone. "Kate, I really like you, and I would like to get to know you better." My confidence weakened with every word. "I thought maybe—" She interrupted. "As I told Sarah yesterday, we are friends, good friends, and I like you, but my situation—" That was all she said before what sounded like a small sob stopped her. When I looked at her, she did look upset for a brief moment, but then hid it with a smile as she linked her hand with mine. "Come on, it's a beautiful day. Too good to be serious. Let's just continue like we did. Please, let's not complicate things." Her words disappointed me, but the feeling of her body pressed against my arm was some compensation. She felt very good, so I decided that I needed to back off and take my time. It was very close. I know I pushed Jakey, running up to him and throwing myself into his arms. I was glad to see him after yesterday, when I had to keep my distance because of Sarah, so today I was so glad to get back to what we had between us. Then he sounded the alarm in my head. He said he wanted to get to know me better. We all know what that euphemism is, so I backed off. I reminded him that we are just friends. With my family situation, I had to be careful. I was well aware that there were people who were very dear to me and who could get hurt. It would be better if we remained just friends. How was I supposed to know what would happen the next day? It all started as usual. I was wearing a pink and white printed summer dress, my favorite sandals, and of course, lingerie. Beautiful lingerie that I didn't expect anyone to see. Then, as we were about to leave the park, the heavens opened. We were sitting on a bench finishing a sandwich. Neither of us had an umbrella, and then it started to rain. The clouds crept up behind us so we couldn't see them. I was instantly soaked to the skin. It was so shocking that we both fell down laughing. The downpour took us both by surprise, and as it turns out, I have a lot to be grateful for. But before we get to that, I have to explain. A sudden summer downpour hit us just as we were about to head home. Kate's summer dress instantly became wet. Because of the color, it did not hide anything. It was almost transparent. As we looked back, it was clear that the rain would get heavier before it stopped. There was nowhere to hide except for a few trees. I decided it would be best to go to my place, since it was closer. I took her hand and led her out of the park along my shortcut. She hesitated for a moment, and I said, "My house is right here. We will make it before the worst overtakes us." Luckily, she only squeezed my hand tighter and followed my lead. Once we entered the house, we quickly toweled off the two dogs and sat them down in the kitchen. I suggested we go into the living room to watch the storm. Kate looked down at her dress and, with a slightly embarrassed expression, stated the obvious. "I look terrible. Can I use the bathroom and try to dry off a little?" Thinking quickly, I decided to take my chance. Now or never. "It's upstairs, second door on the left. There's a robe hanging on a hook there. Put it on, and we can dry your things." I saw a concerned expression appear on her face. Then she turned and headed towards the stairs. 5 minutes later, she came down. "Where is your dryer?" "Here, let me. I'll figure it out." She doubtfully clutched a small pile of clothes to her chest. "It's probably best if I do it," she blushed. "There are some pretty personal things here that need to be dealt with." "Oh, of course. The utility room is through that door." My heart was pounding now. What she said meant that when I began to implement the second part, my hastily drawn-up plan, there would be nothing under my robe. "Do you want tea? Or do I have some white wine?" "A glass of wine would be nice," she said, over her shoulder leaving the kitchen. I heard the dryer turn on, and a minute later she came into the living room. I handed her a glass. and then left to change into my wet clothes. When I returned, Kate was curled up in the corner of my sofa, pulling her knees under her in a way that only women can do. I noticed her hand smoothing the robe so I couldn't see underneath. Then she checked to make sure the lapels were buttoned tightly. Sitting down in the chair opposite, we laughed at how unlucky we were with the weather while sipping our drinks. Then, after a while, I noticed that her glass was empty and offered to pour another, to which she agreed. As she extended her hand to pass the glass to me, the robe fell open. She must have seen my eyes widen because she immediately looked down and saw that most of her left breast was exposed to my gaze. Instead of hastily covering herself, she held out her hand for me to take the glass, and I noticed a shy smile as my eyes darted between her face and the soft swell of her breasts. There was no way she didn't know what kind of view I was facing. She also didn't try to cover herself. Needing no further invitation, I sat down next to her. When I returned with the glasses, she took a sip, then leaned forward to place her glass on the coffee table. When I did the same, I leaned towards her and pressed my lips to hers, first gently, then persistently. Her arms wrapped around my neck. The rest was a blur. The robe simply disappeared, as did my shorts and polo shirt. She wrapped her legs around mine. I lay on top of her beautiful nakedness, our lips still locked together. The inevitable happened. Nature took its toll. We had sex. If the removal of clothes passed in a blur, then what followed was pure animal passion. Kate was just as keen as I was. She was a completely uninhibited lover. The first time was too fast. But we stayed together until I was ready again. To say the ground shook would be an understatement. All the weeks of slow seduction and teasing had created a storm of lust that had me completely overwhelmed, and I think Kate too. Our passion for each other finally burst out. We lay entwined together, catching our breath. Thank you. It was just the right word couldn't form in my mind, and as I struggled for it, Kate rolled over and kissed me, a kiss that told me this wouldn't be our first or our last. She, like me, wanted more. Good old British weather. We did not expect it. A strong squall wet us through just at the moment when we decided to go home. My summer dress was so wet that it became almost transparent. At least I was wearing decent underwear, since anyone walking towards us could get a good look at him. I didn't want to walk near the neighbors' houses in such an open manner. Jake came to my rescue as he led me out of the park on the short route home. My heart began to pound as I realized what this meant. He intended to take me to his house for shelter. This seemed like a smart move, as the intensity of the rain increased as we quickened our pace. The dog seemed eager to get out of the downpour, so even Tasha was undeterred by being taken to an unfamiliar place and immediately explored King's soft bedding in the corner of the kitchen. As I expected, Jake took care of my well-being first, directing me to his bathroom to get out of my wet clothes and into the robe he said was hanging outside the door. Do I dare? Everything I was wearing was soaking wet and needed to be dried. I went for it, took off everything. The robe was his, so it completely covered me. Carefully folding my panties and bra into my dress to hide them from his eyes, I went downstairs to him. He offered to dry my clothes, but I avoided it and took care of it myself, as he directed me to the utility room, which was, as I expected, neat, tidy, and functional. It wasn't until I turned on the dryer that I realized I'd been selfish by not waiting for his wet clothes. But perhaps it was better this way. He handed me a glass of wine when I joined him again, and he went to change into something dry. I was curled up on the end of his couch, checking to make sure I wasn't exposing anything I shouldn't, when he came back into the living room. My glass was soon empty, and he offered me another. As he stood up, I reached out to give him my glass, and realized that my robe had fallen open as I did so. I saw his gaze drop below my face. I looked down where he was looking and saw most of my chest. From where he stood, nothing was hidden from him. Time seemed to stand still. His pupils dilated as his gaze moved from my eyes to my bare chest. For some reason, I didn't feel the need to cover myself, a warm feeling spreading through my body as he took in every detail of what I showed him. And it really was like that. I showed him part of my body, a very intimate part of my body, and I was delighted with the reaction I received from him. He eventually brought us our drinks, but instead of taking the seat across from me, he joined me on the couch. I made only a half-hearted attempt at covering myself up and was left naked enough for the inevitable to happen. And when I say inevitable, I mean what I was hoping for. He kissed me, and God, how he kissed me. My lust took over almost immediately, and soon we were both naked. And we did it. We had sex. I shouldn't have felt this way. It should have felt wrong, but it didn't. It was wonderful. As I let him roll off me, he started to say something, but if he felt the same way I did, he had no words for what we had just experienced. So I silenced him with a kiss. All the while pressing my soft nakedness against him, I wanted him to know that I was not upset with him. I enjoyed what we were doing, and the doubts and guilt that I knew would come later could wait. At that moment, I tried to convey to him my feeling of pleasure and satisfaction. Rightly or wrongly, I tried to let him know that now that I had tasted what we shared, I wanted more, and much more. The rain stopped, and having changed into dry clothes, I went home. I think he wanted me to stay longer, but I had responsibilities, a family to take care of, people who needed me. They relied on me. That was my role in life. Strangely, I still didn't feel regret. I expected it as I got closer to the house, but it didn't come. I was happy. My mood soared. I seemed to be floating in the air. For the first time in weeks, even months, there was a spring in my steps. They would have noticed immediately as soon as I crossed the threshold. I imagined a sign hanging above my head that said, "I just got scammed for sex." I was sure of it. What would they say? I needed to regain control, get rid of that satisfied smile, and pull myself together. I tried. I know I tried. But Sarah noticed it as soon as she saw me. An incredulous look. Was it disapproval? I could tell she knew. I couldn't hide anything from my beautiful daughter. Someone else might not have noticed. But Sarah. This was a completely different matter, and I hoped that she would understand and not judge me too harshly. We talked about everything that concerns her and me, so I know that she has the same wants, needs, and aspirations that I do. She and I are sensual creatures. We like and need the attention of a man, even men. I saw how she flirted with her boyfriends. I could always tell which of them she had intimate relationships with. She never hid it from me, and she couldn't. If anyone could know how I felt, it would be her, and I needed her to understand. She didn't say anything, and I was grateful for that. We were preparing dinner for the family together, and she didn't bring it up. I think she thought Tom might hear. He shouldn't know. It would upset him. He was his father's son. Like his father, even sharing me with my sister, he was sometimes unhappy, but here I am with another man. Never. He would be devastated. He would consider it his duty to protect me. From myself, to remind me of my wedding vows. No, Tom shouldn't suspect. From our glances, Sarah understood this, and my secret was safe for now. I need to be careful. In no case did I want to bring a cart into the house with offense. I have to keep my relationship with Jake a secret. After she left, I felt a little empty, as if a part of me had disappeared. Kate is beautiful. This is what dreams are made of. I am blown away. I had no doubt. We were made for each other. I had never before been tempted to seduce a married woman. But Kate, she's irresistible to me. I can't help myself. I want her more than any other woman I've ever known. She radiates sex, sexuality. I can't get her out of my thoughts. I thought I did well. She seemed to enjoy herself. She definitely left there with a smile on her face. Come to think of it, there are times when she seems a little melancholy, even sad. I did not notice anything like that. During our evening together here in my house, she answered me willingly. Her body freely gave itself to me. I hope she doesn't regret anything and can hide it from her family. If I were her husband and found out that she was with another man, I would be beside myself with rage. It would destroy me. Hypocritical of me, I know. But she gave herself to me freely, and I did not force her in any way. There was no hesitation, nothing held back. Her body responded to every touch, teasing movement, and when I was inside her, she seemed to disappear into me. We were one. a finely tuned sex machine, giving and receiving pleasure in equal measured degrees. We were a couple, connected in every possible way for two people, and for me, it was like heaven. Despite my misgivings, I slept well after the afternoon's fun. Any doubts I had were assuaged by the early morning sun that flooded my room the next day. For the first time in many years, I felt warmth and satisfaction. My whole body came to life from long-forgotten sensations. "Mom, come on. It's late. Will you ever get up?" It was Tom. At least he still needed me. I reluctantly crawled out of my wonderfully warm bed, threw on my robe, and went downstairs to walk him to school. Sarah joined me as I made my morning coffee when our eyes met. I saw her eyes widen slightly, and a smile lit up her beautiful young face. "Someone looks like the cat who got the cream." I saw her look at me more intently. "You look like you've just been satisfied." "Sarah, you can't say things like that to your mother." We both burst out laughing when I stammered, "Even if it's true." "We girls have needs, we both know that." Sarah was still laughing, but she tried to look serious. She saw a shadow of sadness pass over my face. She knew me so well that I could not hide it. "You should get it wherever you can. Don't worry. Your secret is safe with me. I know it's not easy with Dad right now." Seeing silent tears on my cheeks, she did not finish, but jumped up and hugged me. "Sorry, Mom. I shouldn't have talked about it. It's none of my business. Please forgive me." We rocked together, clinging to each other for a long moment, which gave me time to get my emotions under control. Sarah just seemed to know. She understood. "I won't tell him. I'll keep your secret. I promise." I wiped my face with my sleeve. "Come on, we better hurry up. You'll be late." With that, we both headed to our rooms, now ready to face the routine of our days. I heard the door slam as Sarah left the house, and now it was just Tasha and me. The two of us were rushing to finish up some housework before our afternoon walk. I worked hard. It kept me from getting stuck in the dilemma, and the more we got done before lunch, the freer the afternoon was to indulge in any pleasures. Well, at least I did. And here she was, just in time. My heart was pounding with excitement. She would not want a public display of love. It was dangerous. Anyone could see us here on the street. I had to control myself. It doesn't matter to me who knows. But Kate, no, not Kate. She will be embarrassed. I had to control myself. After greeting her in the usual way that I had before what happened yesterday, I knelt down next to her. She deliberately kept a distance from me, quite appropriate if we were not lovers, but now the space between us was too large. I longed to feel the warmth of her body. I wanted to kiss her lips. We can't. Not here. Our conversation was languid. We chatted about everyday problems as we always did before. I was in no hurry. It had to happen when we were out of sight, alone in our own world. Then she would definitely not resist. As we walked, doubts crept in. Does she want this? Will she be happy about my promotion? I needed to kiss her. I needed her to kiss back to confirm that this love affair was real and not my imagination. We were here, on a narrow path, hidden by bushes on both sides. No one could see us. It's now or never. Time to take a chance. Please let me be right. I was so tense that I could barely walk, but I had to do it. I am a man. My job is to lead, to take the initiative. I took 2 quick steps to get in front of her and turned to face her, my arms already enveloping her in a hug. My eyes were glued to hers, trying to read her reaction as I pressed myself against her. What will I tell him when we meet? I needed to think things over because I was sure that he would be waiting for me in his usual place. Did he suffer from the same doubts and confusion that I did? After the dream, did he regret what we did together? Was he full of remorse for taking a married woman into his arms? He was single, and I am a woman with responsibilities. I am not free to do whatever I want, to give away my benefits, to offer my body, as I did. Did he understand my situation, my need for caution? I would die if he rushed to me to take me into his arms. I would like it. I mean the feeling. But not in public. Not where they can see us. Of course not. He was smarter. He should be smarter. But if he experienced the same feelings as I did at that moment, it would be difficult, very difficult, to resist. I didn't need to worry. He greeted me with a smile and a cheerful hello. Then, as usually happens, he settled down next to me, and the dogs quickly greeted each other. We talked about the news of the day after the usual questions. How are you? Are you having a good morning? How much have you done today? And the like. Nothing too personal. The park was crowded. We heard the excited screams of small children on the playground. As we passed by, moving away, we noticed the chirping of birds as they went about their business, calling to their mates or perhaps their chicks. As our walk progressed, I became increasingly worried that yesterday had marked the end of our relationship. There were no flirting comments, no jokes, no laughter, nothing like that. I had a feeling of emptiness. Yesterday's euphoria was disappearing. What had I done? It was only when we turned onto one of the narrow paths, where we were blocked by a hedge of bushes, that he stepped towards me and took me into his arms. His eyes locked on mine, and I saw a question in them. He was unsure, hoping that his step would be welcome. But he did it. He took the first step. Our lips pressed against each other in a kiss so passionate it took my breath away. I felt my body surrender to his embrace, and my mind exploded with lustful desire. I wanted to scream, "Yes! He wants me! He still wants me!" Of course, I didn't scream. My lips and tongue were too busy, but I wanted to. I really wanted to. We stood in each other's arms for many minutes, long, open-mouthed kisses interspersed with soft kisses as our bodies pressed against each other. I was instantly aroused, my body immediately switching to receptive mode. We were lost in our passion and were brought out of it by the sound of footsteps approaching our secluded place. I stepped back from him, straightened my dress in one practiced movement, and stepped towards him, taking his hand in mine. Once we caught up with the dogs, we silently decided to abandon our usual outdoor picnic, even though the weather was perfect for it. We had only one thing on our minds, and a long walk with the dogs in public was out of place. As soon as I felt her small, soft hand in mine, I realized that after this kiss, words were not needed. I felt how she wanted us to be somewhere alone, and quickly. We took the shortest route to my house, and as soon as we closed the door behind us, we immediately took off our clothes and headed to my bed. There was no foreplay, no stroking, minimal touching or kissing. We got right down to business. There was an urgency to it that had been missing the previous day, an affirmation of intention, of need. We lay there for a long time when I rolled over to her side, and then, with a breath, she said, "Oh my God, I needed this, thank you." "I'm eager to please," I kissed her breasts. "You're so sexy, you know that?" She turned me over on my back and kissed me while lying on top of me. We lay together, enjoying the afterglow of the best sex I had ever experienced. If I wasn't already, then this one act confirmed that I wanted this woman. I needed her, and in that moment, I promised myself that she would be my own. I didn't care about her husband or her family. I wanted her and would do everything possible to make her mine. As we raced to his house, there was only one thing on my mind. I wanted Jake. The feeling of need was so strong that I had no other thoughts than getting to his house and undressing. It was great sex. Exhausted, my body and mind filled with awe and excitement from what I had just experienced, I lay on top of Jake until my overloaded senses began to come back to me. Eventually, I rolled off of him, and at that moment, my thoughts went back to the last time I experienced this, when I used my husband's body to achieve these wonderful sensations. Now, I was using someone new. Of course, there were slight differences, but this fuck was for me, for my pleasure, and Jake did not disappoint me. He did all the right things. I sank deeper into our relationship, and surprisingly, I didn't feel any guilt, none at all. In fact, to my relief, it was obvious to me that I wanted more. We took a break for a leisurely lunch, and then returned to his bed and ended the afternoon with another great session of more gentle lovemaking, where I tried to win him back, do it with his needs and pleasure in mind, and I think it was a success. It definitely left me well and truly satisfied. And again, I did not feel guilty. Moreover, I felt happy, liberated, alive. While I was walking home, Our many conversations were replaying in my head, the way he looked at me, the sparkle in his eyes when we laughed together. I wondered why it took me so long to accept Jake as a lover. Sarah, of course, knew as soon as she saw me. This time we were alone in the house, and she simply said, "You did it. This is the man I met while walking the dog, isn't it? You took him as your lover. I saw it. I knew it. I didn't say anything before, but you need to be more careful. It's obvious to me, the way you look now, the way you walk, everything." "Yes, this is Jake. Please keep this to yourself. You must. I beg you." "I'm sorry, Mom. I can't. This should be out in the open. I don't like keeping it a secret. It's just wrong. You're hiding it. It's too much of a risk. You know it'll hurt him. You have to be honest with him." "I'll help you. We'll do it tonight when we sit down to dinner." Before I could object, she turned away and went to her room without giving me a chance to object. As soon as we sat down together, Sarah cleared her throat. "Well, Mom, I think you have something to tell us?" My heart began to beat wildly as I looked around the table. "Yes, you're right. I need to tell you everything." I took a deep breath. "There is a person with whom I became friends and became very close. In fact, we are now lovers." As I expected, Tom gasped, and his face immediately turned red. "What?" he exploded, shouting at me. "What about Dad? How can you betray him like that? What will the rest of the family think? You know how I feel about your dad. I've loved him since I was 18. No one can replace him. And I have a special place in my heart for him. It won't ruin my love for him." My mouth was dry. I expected this. Why then was it so difficult? Tom was just like his father. Both saw the world in black and white, right or wrong, no middle ground. I saw it in his eyes. Pain. He thought of it only as the highest degree of infidelity. He didn't think for a second about what it all meant to me. I had to try to reach him. "You and Sarah will soon leave home, make your own path, start your own families, and then you won't need me. You are old enough to understand that I have my own needs. I am still relatively young. Please give me this chance." I saw a tear roll down my son's cheek as I held his unwavering, angry gaze. "When you get older, you will understand that I really miss the communication that only a man can give a woman. It's the right feeling, something I haven't felt in a long time. And anyway, it's time for me to move on. It's been 3 long years since your dad died. Subscribe to our channel so that your second chaff doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think about listening to the next one.